Hello, welcome to Model Kit Stuff and welcome to part 1 of our build of the Tamiya 1:35 scale Panzerkampfwagen 1 Ausf. This was a new tool release in 2024 and I've been really excited to get stuck into this build, not because of the kit so much, but because of the paints. So I'm going to use Tamiya paints. Now, anyone who's been a subscriber to the channel for any length of time knows that I have a real dislike of Tamiya acrylic paints. I find them difficult to work with. They don't brush paint well, they don't particularly airbrush well, you have to put a lot of effort in to get the results out, and they've just been extremely well marketed historically. But I'm doing only Tamiya paints for this project, but not those acrylic paints that I dislike so much. We're going to use Tamiya's enamel paints. Some of you might not even be aware that Tamiya make enamel paints. They are hard to come by, particularly in the UK. These I bought in Poland. So I have every paint that is listed for this kit, Tamiya paints. We are going to paint the kit and weather the kit with these enamels. Okay, so really interesting. It's a straight out of the box build using only Tamiya enamels, and I'm going to try and weather it using only Tamiya enamels. Now, I might use some pastels and stuff as well, but if we're using paints, we're using this, and if we've not got the colour we need, we'll mix it with these. I want to give the paint system a really good run for its money. How well does it brush? How well does it airbrush? How well does it thin? How well can I do paint effects with it? From modulation to staining to streaking to, let's just see what we can do with it. So, all of that said, let's get stuck in. Right then, so we've got 3 paint options being given. A is Poland 39, B is France 40, and then we've got an unknown unit in Russia 41. I'm thinking we'll go with 4th Panzer Division Poland September 39. Which is the one on the box art, and the reason that I'm thinking that we'll do that is because we bought all the paint in Poland, so it's just a reason, isn't it? Let's start with step 1, which tells us when no colour is specified, paint the item with XF63, which I've just ordered. And I'm expecting within the next week or so, but we won't be doing any painting for a little while. So we're starting with the lower hull. These are all parts on the C sprue with the exception of the front plate there. So let's find that. It's gonna be on there, I reckon. So we can cut those out easy enough. So we've got C1, C8, C4, C10, and then this is, I can't see where the number is for that one. Oh, there it is, C7, but I mean, it's clear what it is. Okay, so that's all of those parts, and then we need the B sprue for B54, which is this part here, and that gets us everything out of the bag for step one. Right, so first step is just to sort out these sprue gate points. So I'm just going to carefully remove those. I'm finding these this RGG sprue cutter to be very, very good, and deeply impressed with it. It leaves me with very little in the way of sanding cleanup if you take your time. So yep, that's that part. Okay, that's all our little nubs removed. So a little bit of sanding to do now. We'll start with the base, and then we can build things up as we go. So this is a 600 grit, because I've only got a little bit of work to do, so this is fine. Takes it back nice and gradual. And that's all there is that you need to do with that. So we'll put that there. Next piece we'll tackle is this. I need to get in there now. Oh, that's not even going to get in. Where's my thinner ones? We just need to make sure that anything that's going to sit on here will sit flush and this won't get in the way. But obviously it's an internal part, so I'm not so fussed about how that looks. Can check the fit of that. There is a seam on the top which we're just going to remove just to be cautious. There we go, so that's in place. We'll just leave that there for a sec. Get our glue out in a minute. So then we've got this back piece that's going to fit on there like so. Looks like the fit of that will be nice. Okay, That all looks good, so we can glue that in now and let that dry. So this might look like I'm using extra thin. You can tell I've had this bottle for a while, it's faded, but this isn't extra thin that's in the bottle. It's actually Tamiya airbrush cleaner, and it's basically the same thing. It's slightly, I mean, not even noticeably, slightly less potent than the extra thin glue. I wouldn't use it in to replace the quick setting, but it's great for the ordinary extra thin, and significantly cheaper if you can get it, but you can't get it in this country. And again, it came from Poland, or it was actually gifted to me from one of our subscribers and channel member who is Polish and goes to Poland quite regularly, and he's managed to pick it up in Poland. So why we can't get it in the UK, I don't know. Now, I said the fit of this part was good, but it's actually not very intuitive. We've got one location pin in the middle, but the rest of it you've got to balance. Right, that seems to be okay. So let's just run some glue along the back there, let that capillary in. So that's our front plate on, and that's that in. I think we'll put the side plates on now before we do the front one. So quick clean up there. Oh, I don't know what I did with that, but I left that one a bit chunky. There we go. That's all good, and then we mustn't forget there's one on the front on the curve, which if we don't get flat will cause us a fit problem with the B54 part. Okay, so let's get my orientation right. So this bit here sticks out of the back there, which means, depending on what's going on there, we might have a couple of ejector pins to fill. So, as we would expect from a new tool Tamiya kit, the fit is precise and perfect, so we've got no issues gluing that in. So whenever you can glue from the back, that would be my general rule of thumb, to do it that way. And then we just pinch that into place at the front. Okay, I'll do the other side off camera and then come back to you. Right, just cleaned up this front plate and we'll just test fit. There's two little notches at the top. That's how you know you've got it orientated right. Fit is perfect. So let's get that glued in. There we go, that is step one done. Took 2 or 3 minutes maybe. Bit of seam to clean up on this part here in the second step. This is part B25, or might be B26, but the same thing, just different hands. So just using my seam scraper. The seam is subtle until you put paint on it, and then it's massive. So you just gotta remove them. This little bit here, we're on a round surface and we've got a nub. where Tamiya's kindly put it in a part you can't really get in, so I'm having to use my little triangular file to take that down. There we go. So that's that nub gone. We can sand that flush, which will get rid of that bit of seam. And then underside of the spring and just along that top edge, just to take any shape out of the profile that the seam's created. Okay, back down the inside of this bit of the spring. There's not much in the way of seam here because it's all this side of the mould join, but we do have to carefully square off this end here. There we go. Okay, so that is the parts cleaned up. We've got 4 parts per side. So we'll start with this one. We've got location pin at the top, and then it mounts onto a location pin that's already moulded on at the bottom. So that's that position there. So let's just get that glued in. Here we go, that's all good. And that's just touching, so we can pop some on there. Then got this little mount here. I think something's going to go on there, so we put that on. That should be sufficient. And then we've got our first poly cap going on. There's little nubs on the inside, 3 little nubs inside this part, so you just have to plop it on and then spin it around until it drops down into place, which it's just done. There we go. That is step 2 in the bag. That's looking quite nice already. So step 3, we've got some bits to build up at the back, so I'll get them out and cleaned up and then I'll come back to you for fitting. Okay, we're ready to assemble these parts for step 3. So we start with these 2 little pieces, A2, little fiddly pieces that go in there. So it's slot. The mounting point is a slot, which keeps the part nice and stable. So it's a good solid fit. It's a nice solution for that. There we go, and then we have these little covers that go in there, so that is covering those ejector pins, so we don't have to worry about that. So there we go. Fit of that is okay. actually looks like it's slightly too long, the piece, but I think it's going to be hidden by the idling wheel. So we'll just glue that one in. Okay, and then we've got this piece that mounts in. The point goes in the bottom one, so we put that in there first, then we can put this piece in and locate that across, and we don't have to glue that bit in just yet. So if we glue these pieces in first, and then you can get the correct rotation, which I think is that way, but I want to just or that way, but I want to just wait until we put the next part on, which is the towing hook. So I'm going to leave that loose for now. So that completes our step 3. Step 4 in our instructions is actually 2 steps. So we have 3 parts that go on after these 2 parts. So we've got 2 different parts which are making up 4 altogether. Oh, this has dropped out because it's not been as yet glued into place. We're going to do that when we come to fit apart in a moment. So first of all, we've got these little parts here, and this is what we're going to mount our idling wheel on. And I think because of the shape of this, it locks into place, so it's got a defined position. So it's not like you can leave it loose and then tension the track with it, but you don't need to tension the track because we're link and length. So we can put that in. It does have a bit of play in it though, so make sure you've got it square all the way around. It's the part I'm most concerned about so far in terms of fit. There we go. I'm going to just take that out for a sec. Then these little lumps go on here, but I want to fit them after I've got that glued in place because I think they might foul it. So we're going to come to fitting of this part next, which goes in here like this. This is our towing hook, and this has a little connection piece on it which connects onto the towing hook. So that's how I'm going to align this correctly. So we're just going to push that in, then line it up. There's a little I think I've got it the wrong way around. Yep, I have. I was wondering why it wasn't going in. There we go. And then if we place this in, you can see how that now connects. So that all looks good. Now we can add these. Okay. Now this is a little bit tricky. Let me show you the instructions. You've got two lamps here. You've got to decide which one you're doing between A and B. The mounting point's fine and everything. What's tricky is deciding what you want to do. Because I really like those type of lamps, but I really want to do paint scheme A, and it's only on the later version. So this is the point where, the first point where you've actually got to make that definite decision. And we are definitely doing A, so we're going to put this one on. Okay, so that completes our step 4 of this build. All looking good. And that completes how far I'm going to go with the instruction flow. So the instructions are now focusing on constructing the wheels, and then it goes on to construct the tracks. That's not how I'm going to build. We're going to build the upper works next, so we've got 2 sub-assemblies. Then we're going to go on and look at what other details we can install before and which we can't, and build up as many sub-assemblies as we can ready for paint. Then we're going to build up the turret and get that ready for paint. Then we're going to go back and do the wheels, get them ready for paint. Then we'll paint it all. Then we'll start doing weathering and stuff, and then we'll do assembly towards the end. That's my plan. So this is as far as we go, 4 steps with the instructions before we move off and do our own thing. Right then, we are now moving to step 10. Which means we're starting on the upper hull, and we start with this part, D3, which is obviously our main upper hull piece. Nicely, we have sprue gates on connector parts that aren't going to be seen or are going to be cleaned up. So nice bit of engineering there from Tamiya. And the detail on this is really quite nice. So we have a couple of parts that are going in here. So there's multiple steps within step 10. So I'm going to just locate and cut out all the parts for step 10, and then I'll come back to you. Right then, all the parts are cleaned up. We start with the upper hull piece, which we're going to turn upside down. First thing we've got to do is shove this vent in at the back. So that goes in, and then that sits really nice there. So once again, we can glue that all in from the back. All slots in perfectly, as we would expect for a Tamiya kit. There we go. And then we've got a grill that goes in here. And this time it doesn't fit perfectly because I just said that. So we're just going to run some glue in there. Flip it over, and you can see it's just not quite making contact on that back corner there. But it will do in a minute. Don't you worry. The pot. Don't know if the part is slightly warped, maybe. Don't know. Yeah, if I push it down, it pulls that down. So I think there's a little bit of warpage. I think what we'll do is we'll leave it for now, and we'll tidy that up when we put the back piece in. that'll go on at some point in the future, and then we can lock it all down. So yeah, that's the first two parts on. Then we're flipping this over and it goes on there. I've not fitted this to these two parts together before, but that all looks nice and healthy, doesn't it? So yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much how the actual thing's built. It just bolts on top. So yeah, I can see through it though. Right, well, I think we'll glue one side down first and see how we get on. Yeah, this doesn't fit quite as perfectly. Got some gaps. If I don't hold it together, we've got some gaps. So I'll just give that a second. Hi, hope you're enjoying the video. I put a lot of effort into making these videos, putting them together, recording them, editing. It takes up so much time. I would really love it if you could just hit that like button for me. It will take you a fraction of a second and it costs you nothing, and it means so much to me and the channel, and will help other people who might enjoy this video find it. You done it? Thank you. Right, now I've got that sort of clamped together, we can just run some glue in the joints further along where it does fit better, in fairness. And then at the front here, again, we need to be holding that down just to get that to sit on there. So there's a little steel strip there that sits on top of there. We need that to clamp down. What I don't want though is oozy molten plastic. So I am finding a little bit of just holding it into place for a moment is required. So here across the front you can see it needs pushing into place as well. I'm just going to do that. There we go, and then I can get some glue in that on that side. And don't worry too much about gaps here, because on the actual tank it just sits on there. You know, it's you do get I mean, you don't get gaps, but you do well, not huge gaps, but it is just plonked on top. It's held down by gravity and a few bolts, you know. It's not welded on or anything like that. I've seen one being restored for the Australian Tank Museum. It's quite interesting. And we can move along the back, and once you've got about 2/3 of the way around, the fit seems to improve. Everything's sort of aligning itself. There we go. Right, so we've got that in now, and that's all holding nicely. So then we've got this front panel that pops into here, like so, and that goes in lovely. And we've got some nice welding seam detail there as well. There we go, that's all good. Right, and then we've got some viewing ports to put on. Now, all the viewing ports have to be put in the closed position. There's no mechanism for them to be open, which is a real shame, because you'd only have them closed if the vehicle was either in action or parked up, like in the garage or the parking lot or something like that, and it was all closed up and no one was in it. So the fact that we've got them closed and we've got the commander or we've got two figures sitting out of it. It's actually wrong, because they would only really close these because they reduced the visibility so much when they were under fire, and then they'd close all those compartments and knuckle down in the tank. So bit of a faux pas from Tamiya, I think, that you can't have them open. But then of course there is no interior, so you'd then be going, well, it needs an interior if you're going to have them open. So then no doubt that is why they didn't give you an option to open them. But it does mean that you're forced to build the tank historically wrong if you put the figures on, which is a bit of a shame. But you're seeing a little bit more, at least I think I'm seeing a little bit more of that sort of shortcut from Tamiya. They are, I know they're not saying it, they are clearly stepping back from model kits a little bit. You know, they talk a lot about the RC market a lot now, but they are definitely pulling back. The number of new releases is dropping. The number of hybrid releases where they new tool an element and then put an old tool with it, they're increasing, and they're just chucking out the same old kits, you know. So, you know, we haven't seen new ships and things like that for ages. We've not had much in the way of aircraft even, which you'd think was bread and butter. But this completes step 10. So all gone together pretty well, no issues as you've seen. So step 11, we've got some small parts to go on, mainly lifting hooks. I'm going to clean them up and then I'll come back to you. There is some absolutely minute parts that we've got to clean up, which are little lifting hooks. I mean, they're specks of parts, and the front edge is like flat. And that's where the sprue gate is, so you end up with the nub there, and that's the bit that faces forward and is actually very visible. So I'm just using a very narrow pair of self-locking tweezers, and that can hold that in place while we just smooth off that front face and get rid of that sprue gate witness. There we go, simple as that. So in step 11, it asks you to glue this on to here. We're not going to do that, but we are going to check the fit. Yeah, that's okay. That seems to be good all the way around. So yeah, happy with that. So we might as well leave it on there, which will just give us a bit of a more stable base while we're gluing all these little hooks on. I'm actually going to start with this side door, which was often dropped down and then one of the crew members could sit on it. In this instance though, we don't have a crew member for it and we have nothing inside, so we're just going to glue that shut. Like so. Where is it? There we go. Right, these little hooks, we've got two different types of hooks. I'm going to put the slightly bigger one, which is part A7, on first. So there we go, and that actually has a fairly decent location hole to go into. Like that. So that one's nice and easy. Then these ones are a little bit more tricky. We've got two to go in at the front. So no, careful, I nearly put that one in back to front. There we go. So that one's located okay. Spot of glue. Happy with that position. Spot of glue. And then we've got two These are part A1, by the way. 2 that go here. So they're going to be a little bit more tricky, and again, the orientation is different than I expected. So the flat edge faces down. There we go, and last one. And again, the flat edge faces down. There we go. That seems right. Okay, so that completes step 11. We will glue the upper hull in after painting because it's going to be easier for attaching the wheels, which the instructions wanted us to do, but I want to be able to paint behind here before we put the wheels on. We will come back to wheel assembly last before we do the painting. So if we look at our instructions, if I just bring you out a little bit and I turn our page, so step 12, some of this I'm happy to put on, headlamps without lenses for example, but I don't want to put the Pioneer tools on. We can probably put those, the S hooks and the starter handle on because they're actually calling for a different paint colour, so we perhaps won't put those on, but we can certainly put the headlamps and the horn on. Then in step 13 we've got the wooden block going on, and more tools and more lamps, and again we can put the little lamps in but not the clear parts. We can put the big hooks on the front. I'm not going to put the wooden block on, and I'm not going to put the shovel on. Then we've got this photo etch being formed, and that is going on around the exhaust, and then yeah, you have to build that up before you install it. So I think what I want to do is just have a look at that and see how much of an issue it is, because we might be able to form that, glue that in place with that in place, and take it out again, so we can paint the exhaust separately, paint that separately, and then build it all together and have that installed in the back. I think we need to look at the fit of all that before we do that. Then in step 17 we've got the ventilation hose, so that I think gets painted in a different colour, so we can leave that off. So I don't think there's anything in step 16 and 17 that we want to put on. Step 18, we can put this on. This is actually wooden, but it is painted in the same colour. We've got some more hooks going on, a little plate there. We'll have to see if that's possible. And then we've got the turret. So I think I want to work through the various bits and pieces that we can put on the upper hull, and get ourselves to the turret, build up the turret, then we can go back, do the wheels, and we're just ready for painting then, which is sort of the main objective of this build. But we have a lovely little Panzer one coming together already. It's looking the part. It's going together really, really well. No issues. So yeah, let's crack on. In the main, even the small parts are in good nick, and you don't need to worry too much about the cleanup. A little bit of seam here and there. You do have occasionally a moulding limitation, so you can see there's a little step here that shouldn't be there, so we're just going to trim that off, turn it back to the shape it should be, which is in line with the rest of the back of the part. And then I'm just going in, sanding that back, and then we can finally scrape it into shape. And it's those little details that make such a difference. And the same on the other side. So under paint it will stand out, so we need to just get rid of this little square. It's a feature of how Tamiya do their moulding. You get them quite a bit on curved surfaces like this. I guess they do it to make sure they've got enough plastic in. I don't really know, but they are simple to sort out. They're not difficult. So there we go, and then I just need to remove the nub. I'd only do this with a single bladed precision nipper of high quality. There we go. And that should now just fit nicely into our part. Let's just see. Yeah, that goes in okay. And that sits nicely. And I'm quite happy to glue that in and paint that as part of the main thing. But I'm going to clean up several other parts first, and then I'll come back to you when I'm ready to glue them all in. So you can see here on this part how it's slightly diamond shaped, and so that needs straightening up, and you can just do that with the heel of your knife and trim it level, and then go back under it and take it out and straighten that up. Again, it's another feature of how Tamiya remove their parts from their moulds, and just putting that slight V in makes it easier for them, so you can easily sort that out. So one of the most tricky parts so far to clean up is this one here. Every surface needs cleaning up. There's a lot of quite heavy seam on it. You've got difficult spaces to clean up, and yeah, and it's quite a small fiddly part. So let me show you how I tackle this, just out of interest for those of you that might be newer to the hobby. So the way I tackle small parts like this is using one of these little clips. They hold in your hand really well. They're comfortable to hold. You can put pressure on them so that you're on the jaw, so that you're not moving the part. And I'm going to start by putting a little hook of the plastic part into the jaw and getting it up as high as we can. There we go. That means I've got my hand free, and I'm no longer holding a tiny part. I'm holding quite a big part, and that makes a big difference to how I'm able to clean this up. Just going to move this down to the bottom of the jaw, and what I can do is support underneath as I'm sanding it with my finger. Okay, and we can square it off as well because it's not square. Another thing Tamiya does to get the part out of the tool, and then we can square this off as well and get rid of the seam on the top there. There we go. And then in the corner where it's a little difficult to get in, I'm just gonna use my blade on my craft knife just to square that up and make it nice and sharp. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now, and we've got the same angle to sort here. There's quite a bit of seam there as well, so I'm going to go in and deal with that in the same way as we did before. I'm using a slightly wider one. No particular reason other than the grit is less used. The narrow one needs replacing a bit really. And now I can just make sure that's all nice and square. Using the 600, I'm dropping the grit from, I'm not quite sure what the grit was on the other one. So that is now almost done. I'm just lastly going to go in with a little seam scraper and just get rid of any debris in there. I don't think it's quite flat on that surface, so there we go. Okay, I can now take that out and put that back in the same way as it's going to attach on the vehicle. And that allows me then with my seam scraper to get in and do the seam. So we've got a seam here which will stand out under paint, so we need to remove that. So we just scrape that away. Then when we get to the top of the hook, there's seam there, and I'm going to use a sponge on that one because the top of the hook is slightly rounded and I don't want to square it off. And the same on the top of this, it's slightly rounded on the back plate there. So use a sponge on anything that's slightly rounded, and then I'm getting back in with my scraper, taking the seam off behind the hook on the back plate, and then I'm just going to run it around the inside of the hook there. There we go. And that's the most difficult part I've had to clean up so far. Done. So ready to start gluing some parts on now. So we've got a whole collection of large and small parts that we can add on to this. So we're going all the way back to step 12 and starting with the little plate that goes in there. So obviously this hatch is shut, so we place that in. That sits down nicely. Little bit of glue in the hinges to start with, and then we're going to run some into the gap. Okay, that's that piece in. Then we've got the lamps and the horn, so let's just dig those out. So the horn goes in this little hole here at the front, so I'm going to place it in first, he says. There we go. Make sure it's angled back correctly and not sort of leaning forward, which there's enough slack in the fit for that to happen if you're not careful. And then we can glue that in from the back. So there we go, that's the horn in, and then we do exactly the same on the lamp. Place it in, make sure it's square. I can actually hold that in place while I glue in from the back. There we go, that looks good. So happy with that. Then we've got our wooden block. We can put this on and paint this in. This is on step 13 because it's easy enough to get to the wood sections to paint the wood sections in, so I'm not going to worry. So that's that in place, and we can glue the location pins in from behind. So there's two little, I guess they're indicator lamps, or I'm sure they're not indicator lamps, but additional driving lamps or something like that that we need to mount, and I'm just making sure I put the right one in. So what I'm doing is test fitting and then gluing into place. I mean, test fitting is good practice even on a Tamiya kit, but you don't generally have an issue with fit with a Tamiya kit as a rule. Right, where's my tweezers? There we go. It's easier than fumbling around with my fingers, isn't it? Okay, so we've got that in. And again, we can just glue that from beneath. So we've got these little hooks that need to go on. They actually go across both the top and lower hull. They go on here, so they sort of bring them both together, but I'm just looking at them to see if we could actually put these in place just on the lower just on the upper hull. So the way they go on, so it's a little bit difficult to understand from the drawing, but the way they go on, I think, is like that. So I don't see why we can't just glue them in at the top and not at the bottom. So that's what I'm going to try and do. So I've just put some glue on the top bit only, obviously. Let's do this one. Now I do plan there we go. I do plan to paint the bottom and upper chassis slightly differently. We're going to try brush painting the bottom one, and we're going to airbrush the top one. So there we go, that shouldn't be a problem. Just make sure that's nicely seated. Yeah. So that's our little tow hooks on at the front. So I'm just going to place this upside down because we now have a lip where those hooks are, and while the glue is soft I don't want them being pushed out of place. I can carry on now, and I've done, just to explain where I am with this, I've taken the former out ready for the small photo etch part, and that goes in there. My plan is that we're going to form this and then glue it, paint it separately and then attach it, and obviously we've got the exhaust to go behind it. So maybe while the glue is drying on this, we can have a quick look at doing that. Okay, I want to just form this photo etch part ready for painting, and you can't, obviously you've got an exhaust under it which is a different colour, and the way this works is it threads through here and then there's a piece that goes in the back and that sort of locks it into place, and then you have to bend the tabs over. So I can't actually attach this back piece that goes in this opening here until we have that painted up, the exhaust painted up, and that attached. So that's going to be a separate sub-assembly for me. But what I want to do is just take the springiness out of our photo etch before I form it. So we're just going to heat it up a little bit to do that. So I always use these type of tweezers for anything that's involving heat. There we go. And we're just going to hold it over the flame and wait for it to change colour. Doesn't usually take very long. Yeah, I can see that's starting to change colour now. So it goes a slightly yellow colour, and I'm looking for a sort of blue tint. Okay, that should do. So we don't need to quench it or anything like that. We'll just give it a moment to cool down and then we should be able to form it.